Hey, family. Welcome to Mr. Gray Family, where every story begins with us. She was already pushing when she realized the man delivering her babies was the one who broke her heart. Pamela, stay with me. Breathe. The voice cut through everything. Sharp, familiar, too familiar. Pamela's fingers tightened around the hospital sheets as another contraction hit, stronger than the last. Her body folded into the pain, her breath catching halfway before she forced it out. I am breathing, she managed, her voice strained, almost swallowed by the pressure. The room was moving fast around her. Nurses shifting, equipment adjusting, calm voices layered over urgency. But Pamela wasn't looking at any of that. Her eyes were locked on him, Christopher, standing at the foot of her bed, focused, composed, dressed in a clean white coat, like he belonged there, like he had always belonged there. Her heart skipped in a way that had nothing to do with labor. For a second, just one, everything blurred. Not the room, not the pain, time. Christopher, she said, her voice barely holding together. He didn't answer immediately, not because he didn't hear her, but because he was looking at her the same way. Like the moment didn't quite make sense, like life had just placed them somewhere neither of them planned to be. Then another contraction hit. Hard. Pamela gasped, her body pulling forward as instinct took over again. Okay, focus, a nurse said gently beside her. You're doing good. Stay with us. But Pamela's mind was split now, half of her fighting through the pain, the other half trying to understand why the one man she had buried deep in her past was standing right here, now, of all places, of all moments. You got me? She asked suddenly, her voice softer this time, but real, not loud, not dramatic, just needing to hear it. Christopher stepped closer, just enough for her to see his face clearly through everything. I've got you, he said, no hesitation, no confusion in his voice, just certainty. And something about that, something steady, settled a small part of the storm inside her, but not all of it, because this wasn't just a doctor. This was the man who once sat across from her in a quiet apartment, promising her a future he didn't stay long enough to build. This was the man who chose ambition over presence, the man she had to let go of, so she wouldn't lose herself. And now, push, Pamela, Christopher said firmly, bringing her back. The room closed in again, reality snapping back into place. She pushed, her breath broke, her body followed, everything in her focused on one thing now, getting through this moment. Still, her eyes didn't leave him. How are you here? She asked, the question slipping out between breaths. Christopher didn't answer that. Not yet. There was no space for explanations. Not right now. Again he said, you're almost there. Another contraction, another push. Her grip tightened. The pain rose. And somewhere in the middle of it all, her thoughts flickered. A memory. Christopher laughing quietly in a kitchen years ago. Her teasing him about something small. The way he used to look at her like she mattered. Like she was enough. Then, gone. Just like that. Because life moved on. And she did too. Or at least, she thought she did. Pamela. Focus, he said again, his tone sharper this time, pulling her back. I am focused, she snapped lightly, even through the strain. A nurse smiled briefly at that, but the moment didn't last, because this was real. This wasn't a memory. This wasn't the past knocking gently. This was the past standing in front of her, holding her present in his hands. Have you ever moved on from someone, only for life to bring them back when you least expected it? Because that's what this was. Not timing, not coincidence. Something else entirely. What do you do when your past shows up in the middle of your most vulnerable moment? Pamela didn't have time to answer that, because another wave hit, stronger, closer, everything tightening again. Stay with me, Christopher said, and this time, it wasn't just instruction. It sounded like something more, something unfinished. Stay with me. Because what happens next will change everything. Before we go further, like this video and drop a comment. It helps this story reach more people. Welcome to Mr. Gray Family, a storytelling universe built for people who crave meaning, emotion, and unforgettable narratives. Here, every story begins with a spark. and ends with a feeling you'll carry long after the video ends. Love, betrayal, family, secrets, lessons, it's all here, wrapped in immersive narration that makes you forget everything else. If you're searching for stories that pull your heart, challenge your mind, and keep you coming back, subscribe now. Your story begins the moment you choose to stay. Cleveland had its own rhythm, not loud, not trying to impress anyone, just steady. The kind of place where people remembered small things about you, what street you grew up on, what your mother used to cook on Sundays, the school you walked to as a child. Even if years passed, those details stayed. Pamela liked that. It made life feel grounded, predictable in a way that didn't feel boring, just safe. At 31, her life wasn't flashy. No big headlines, no dramatic highs, but it was hers. She built it piece by piece, sometimes slowly, sometimes the hard way, but it stood. Her apartment sat on the east side, modest but warm, the kind of place that always carried a soft scent of vanilla candles mixed with whatever meal she made the night before. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like home. Most evenings, you'd find her moving around quietly, folding clothes halfway before pausing, sitting down for a second longer than she planned. Pregnancy had changed her pace. Not the light, glowing version people joked about online. Real pregnancy. The kind that made your back ache before noon. The kind that made sleep feel like a negotiation instead of rest. Pamela lowered herself slowly onto the couch, one hand pressing gently against her lower back. All right now. Y'all doing a lot today, she murmured, exhaling. Her other hand rested on her belly. Twins. Even now, it still felt unreal saying it in her head. A boy and a girl. She remembered the doctor smiling when he told her weeks ago, like he was handing her a gift wrapped in excitement. And she had smiled back. But later, sitting alone in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, she had whispered quietly, "Lord, you really said double?" She let out a small laugh now, shaking her head at the memory. But beneath that laugh was something deeper. Not fear exactly, just awareness. Because this wasn't just about bringing children into the world. It was about doing it alone. And Pamela didn't use that word lightly. She had people, family, friends, community. But when it came down to the quiet moments, the ones no one saw, it was just her. And she had made peace with that. Or at least, she told herself she had. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her. A reminder, doctor's appointment. She glanced at it, then leaned her head back for a second. "Okay, we moving," she said softly, like she was convincing her own body. Standing up took effort, not dramatic, just slow, careful, every movement measured now. She grabbed her bag, checked her keys, then paused for a second in front of the mirror near the door. For a moment, she just looked at herself, not critically, not harshly, just honestly. Her face carried a quiet strength, not loud, not attention-seeking, the kind you only noticed if you really looked. "All right," she said to her reflection. "We good." And she meant it, even if good didn't mean easy. Her job at the clinic kept her busy most days. Patient coordinator, not glamorous but steady. She liked helping people, even when the system felt overwhelming, even when the days stretched longer than planned. It gave her purpose. And right now, purpose mattered more than anything else. Because idle moments, those were dangerous. That's when thoughts crept in, memories she didn't invite, questions she didn't want to answer. So she stayed busy, handled what was in front of her, focused on what she could control. Outside, Cleveland moved like it always did. Cars passing, people walking with somewhere to be. Nothing about the world hinted that anything major was about to shift. And Pamela liked that, because she wasn't looking for change. She had already been through enough of it. The drive to the hospital was quiet, no music, just the soft hum of the engine and her thoughts drifting in and out. She rested one hand on the steering wheel, the other lightly on her belly. "You good in there?" she murmured. A small kick answered her. She smiled. Okay. I hear you." That moment, simple, quiet, meant more than she could explain, because, no matter what, she wasn't alone in the way she used to be. Still, there were moments, little ones, When she'd glance at couples walking side by side, or see a man holding a woman's hand in the waiting room, and something inside her would pause, not longing exactly, just noticing. Then she'd shake it off, refocus, because her life didn't depend on what she didn't have. It depended on what she was building. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind sometimes, clear as ever. Don't depend on nobody who can wake up one day and change their mind. Pamela carried that with her. Every decision, every boundary, every time she chose herself, even when it felt heavy. She pulled into the hospital parking lot, turning off the engine slowly. For a second, she just sat there, quiet, breathing. Something about today felt different, not loud, not obvious, just a small shift in the air she couldn't explain. She frowned slightly, brushing it off. Probably just tired, she murmured. But deep down, something didn't sit right. Pamela stepped out of the car, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. The walk inside was steady, measured, familiar. But that feeling, it followed her right through the entrance, right to the check-in desk, right into the waiting room. She sat down carefully, glancing around. Couples filled most of the space, soft conversations, quiet laughter, a man rubbing his partner's shoulder gently. Pamela looked away after a second, not uncomfortable, just aware. She placed both hands on her belly again. "We good," she whispered. And again, she meant it, but as her name was called, and she slowly stood to follow the nurse down the hallway. That feeling returned, stronger now, not fear, not panic, just something unfamiliar, like a memory trying to rise before she could place it, and Pamela, without realizing it, was walking straight toward it. There was a time when Pamela believed in love that stayed, not the kind people talked about just to sound hopeful, real love, the kind that showed up every day without needing reminders, the kind that didn't make you question where you stood. Back then, that belief had a name, Christopher. She hadn't said it out loud in years, but names like that don't really leave. They settle somewhere quiet in your memory, waiting for moments like this. They met in Cleveland. Nothing dramatic about it. No big entrance. No perfect setup. Just timing. And two people who weren't looking for anything serious. Until they found it. Christopher wasn't who he is now. Not even close. No titles. No wealth. No polished presence. Just a man with ideas. A lot of ideas. The kind that came out faster than he could organize them. Pamela used to sit across from him, watching him talk, one eyebrow slightly raised. "You ever take a break?" she asked once. "Or your brain just on full speed all the time?" Christopher laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm building something." "You always building something," she replied, shaking her head. "Yeah," he said with a small smile, "just waiting for one of them to work." She smiled back, not because she fully believed him, but because she believed in him, and at the time, that was enough. Their relationship didn't try to impress anyone. It just existed. Movie nights that turned into long conversations. Grocery runs that somehow became debates about which cereal was actually worth buying. "You really picking that one?" Pamela said once, holding up the box. "It's efficient," Christopher replied. "It's bland. It's practical. It's boring." He shrugged. She tossed it back on the shelf. "We getting the good one." He laughed. "Compromise," he said. "Exactly," she replied. And that's how they moved. Not perfect, but balanced. Christopher came from a different world. Quieter, structured. His family spoke calmly, measured their words. Pamela's world, completely different. Loud, warm, full of overlapping conversations and people who didn't wait their turn to speak. The first time he stepped into one of her family gatherings, he stood still for a second, just taking it all in. Pamela leaned closer, trying not to laugh. "You good?" Christopher nodded slowly. "I think your aunt just invited me to 2 cookouts and a birthday party in the same sentence." Pamela smiled. "Yeah, you probably going to all of them." He exhaled. "Okay." She nudged him lightly. "You'll survive." And he did, not by changing who he was, but by showing up, trying, learning, and that mattered. There was something about Christopher that made Pamela feel steady, not overwhelmed, not unsure, just settled. He wasn't loud with his feelings, didn't always say everything directly, but the way he looked at her, that said enough, like he knew she was rare, even if he didn't always have the words to explain it. And Pamela? She trusted him. That was the part that mattered most, because trust didn't come easy to her, not after everything she had seen growing up, not after the lessons her mother made sure she understood. But Christopher? He earned it, little by little, day by day. "You ever think about where we going?" Pamela asked one night, sitting beside him. Christopher glanced at her. "Yeah, and..." He paused for a second, then answered honestly, "I don't have everything figured out yet." Pamela nodded slowly. "I don't need perfect," she said, "just need real." Christopher met her eyes. "You got real," he said, and at that time, she believed him. But life doesn't always change in obvious ways. Sometimes it shifts quietly. Small things first. Christopher started working longer hours. Nothing unusual at first. He had always been driven. But then came the missed calls, the late replies, the "I'll make it up to you" that started sounding more like a pattern than a promise. Pamela noticed. Of course she did. She paid attention to energy more than words. And something had changed. Not overnight, but enough. One evening, she sat across from him at dinner, food untouched, silence sitting between them like it belonged there. "You're not here anymore," she said. Christopher looked up, slightly confused. "I'm right here." "No," she replied calmly. "You sitting here, but you somewhere else." He exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "That's not fair." "It is," she said, her voice steady, "because I'm paying attention." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm trying to build something," he said. "And I supported that," Pamela replied, "but not at the cost of losing you." Christopher didn't respond immediately, and that silence, that told her everything she needed to know, because sometimes it's not what someone says, it's what they don't. Pamela leaned back slightly, studying him, not angry, not emotional, just clear. And in that moment, something shifted inside her, not broken, but changing. She didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of the end. And years later, in a hospital room she never expected to be in, looking at the same man standing in front of her, Pamela would realize something. Some connections don't disappear. They pause. They wait until life decides to bring them back. At the exact moment, everything is on the line. Christopher didn't change all at once. That would have been easier to understand, easier to confront, easier to fix. Instead, it happened in pieces so small they almost didn't register at first. The late nights started as explanations. "I just need a little more time this week." Pamela didn't question it. She had seen his drive from the beginning. It was part of what made her believe in him. So she adjusted. Dinner got pushed back. Phone calls got shorter. Time together became something they had to plan instead of something that happened naturally. At first, she told herself it was temporary, something they would look back on and laugh about once everything settled. But things didn't settle. They stretched. Christopher's ideas were no longer just ideas. They were becoming something real. Meetings replaced evenings. Deadlines replaced conversations. And slowly, without either of them saying it out loud, the balance they once had began to shift. Pamela noticed it in the quiet moments, the ones no one talks about, like sitting on the couch beside him while he typed away on his laptop, barely looking up, or when she spoke and he responded, but didn't really hear her. "You listening?" she asked one night. Christopher nodded quickly, eyes still on the screen. "Yeah." She waited, then asked, "What did I say?" He paused, just for a second, but that second was enough. Pamela leaned back against the couch. "Exactly," she said quietly. Christopher exhaled, closing the laptop halfway. "I'm just trying to get this done." "I know," she replied. And she did. That was the part that made it harder. Because she understood him, understood the pressure, understood the hunger to build something more than what he started with. But understanding didn't erase absence. Days turned into patterns. Patterns turned into distance. And distance? It didn't always look like arguments. Sometimes it looked like silence. There were dinners where they sat across from each other with nothing urgent to say. Not because they didn't care, but because something between them had stopped flowing the way it used to. Christopher still reached for her sometimes, still kissed her forehead when he passed by, still said her name in that familiar tone, but it felt thinner, like something essential had been stretched too far. Pamela didn't react immediately. She watched. She listened. She paid attention to what wasn't being said. One evening, she stood by the window, arms folded loosely, watching the street below. Christopher was behind her, pacing slowly, phone pressed to his ear. "No, that's not the direction we discussed," he said, his voice controlled but firm. She didn't turn around. She didn't interrupt. She just stood there, letting the moment settle. When he finally ended the call, there was a brief silence. Then, "You ate?" he asked. Pamela nodded slightly. "Yeah." Another pause. "I'll grab something later," he added. She turned then, looking at him fully. "You said that yesterday." Christopher blinked. "I've just been busy." "I know," she said again. Same words, different weight. He ran a hand over his face. "I'm doing this for us." Pamela held his gaze. "And I was with you when it was just an idea," she replied. Her voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't raised. It was steady, grounded. "And I'm still here," she continued. "But I don't feel like I'm part of what you're building anymore." Christopher didn't answer immediately, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to respond without admitting something he wasn't ready to face. So he stayed quiet. And Pamela? She noticed that too. That silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like space, the kind that slowly grows between two people until one day it becomes too wide to ignore. After that night, she stopped asking certain questions, not out of anger, but out of clarity. She adjusted her expectations, stopped waiting up as late, stopped checking her phone every few minutes, stopped filling the silence with effort that wasn't being matched. Christopher noticed the change. Of course he did. But instead of addressing it, he leaned further into what he understood best: work, progress, movement. Because as long as he kept moving forward, he didn't have to stop and look at what he might be leaving behind. Pamela, on the other hand, stood still long enough to see it clearly, and once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. There was no single moment where everything broke, no loud argument, no dramatic exit, just a slow realization settling into place. They weren't where they used to be, and neither of them knew how to get back there. Or maybe one of them had already stopped trying, and that was the part that hurt the most. Christopher came home earlier than usual that evening, not early enough to feel intentional, just early enough to feel different. Pamela noticed the moment he stepped in, not because she was waiting at the door, but because she had learned his patterns. And this wasn't one of them. "You're back," she said from the kitchen, her voice calm, steady. Christopher placed his keys down, glancing toward her. "Yeah." No explanation followed. He loosened his sleeve slightly, looking around like he was trying to settle into a space that used to feel natural. Pamela didn't rush the moment. Dinner was already on the table, not elaborate, just enough. The kind of meal she used to enjoy preparing when things between them felt whole. Now, it was routine, something that needed to be done. "Food's ready," she said, taking her seat. Christopher nodded, joining her. For a few seconds, the only sound was the faint clink of cutlery against plates. No tension, no ease, just quiet. Christopher glanced up once, then back down. Pamela noticed that too. "You don't have a call?" she asked. He shook his head. "No." Another pause. Then, "That's new." Christopher exhaled lightly, not defensive, but not open either. "I cleared my schedule." "For tonight?" she asked. "For us," he replied. The words landed, but they didn't settle the way he expected. Pamela held her fork for a moment, then placed it down gently. "Okay." That was all she said, and somehow, that made it heavier. Christopher looked at her more directly now. "I know I've been busy." Pamela nodded once. "You have. I'm trying to fix that." She didn't respond immediately, not because she didn't hear him, but because she was choosing her words carefully. "You're trying now," she said. Christopher frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," she replied calmly, "you noticed something was off, and now you're trying to adjust. That's a good thing, Pamela. It is, she agreed. Another pause. Then she added, but it's late. Christopher leaned back slightly, processing that. Late how? Pamela met his eyes, late enough that I already adjusted too. That landed differently. He sat up a bit straighter. What are you saying? She took a slow breath. No anger, no frustration, just honesty. I stopped expecting you. Christopher's expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough. That's not fair, he said quietly. It is, she replied, because I didn't stop overnight. Silence followed, the kind that doesn't need to be filled immediately. Christopher rubbed his hands together slowly. I've been doing this for us. Pamela nodded. I know that's what you believe. It's not what I believe. It's what I'm doing. She tilted her head slightly. Then why does it feel like I'm not part of it? Christopher didn't answer right away, because that question didn't have a simple answer, and they both knew it. I needed time, he said finally. And I gave you time, Pamela replied. Her voice never rose, never cracked. It stayed steady in a way that made every word land clearly. I gave you space to build, to grow, to figure things out, she continued. But somewhere in that, you stopped making space for me. Christopher looked down at the table, then back at her. I'm here now. Pamela held his gaze. But you weren't when it mattered. That was it. Not loud, not dramatic. Just true. Christopher leaned forward slightly, his voice lower now. What do you want me to say? Pamela didn't hesitate. I don't need you to say anything. Another pause. Then, I needed you to show up. Silence. Heavy, unavoidable. Christopher opened his mouth slightly, then closed it, because there was nothing to argue, nothing to defend, only something to face. Pamela looked at him for a moment longer, then she pushed her plate slightly away, not abruptly, just enough to signal she was done. With the food? He asked. With this, she replied. Christopher's brow tightened. Pamela, I'm not angry, she said gently, cutting him off. And she meant it. That was the part that made it real. I'm just clear. Those words didn't break. They settled. Christopher sat still. No movement, no quick response. Because somewhere deep down, he understood. And understanding didn't come with a solution this time. It came with silence. Pamela stood slowly, adjusting her posture. For a second, she looked like she might say something else, but she didn't. Because everything that needed to be said already had been. Christopher watched her, waiting, but she simply walked past him, not rushed, not hesitant, just steady. And the space she left behind, it stayed, right there at the table, between two people who once knew how to reach each other without trying, now sitting in a quiet that said more than any argument ever could. Because sometimes, the end doesn't come with noise, it comes with understanding. And silence becomes the only thing left that makes sense. The apartment felt different the next morning. Not empty, not unfamiliar, just quieter. Pamela stood in the kitchen, one hand resting lightly against the counter as the kettle warmed. The soft hum filled the space, steady and uninterrupted. Christopher wasn't there. There had been no dramatic exit the night before, no door slammed, no last words thrown across the room. Just a quiet understanding that settled between them, and neither of them tried to undo it. Pamela reached for a mug, moving slowly, deliberately. Her body still felt the weight of everything, but her mind? Clear in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. She poured the hot water, watching the steam rise for a second before stepping back. Silence didn't press on her the way it used to. It didn't feel like something missing. It felt like something settled. She carried the mug to the couch and sat down carefully, adjusting her position until she was comfortable. Her hand rested on her belly again, a familiar habit now, a grounding one. We all right? She murmured softly. A small movement answered her. Not strong, just enough. Pamela smiled faintly. That alone was enough to steady her, because whatever had ended, this hadn't, and that mattered. More than anything else, her phone buzzed lightly on the table beside her. She glanced at it. A message. She didn't rush to check it. Instead, she took a slow sip of her tea, letting the warmth settle before reaching for the phone. It wasn't Christopher. She didn't feel relief. She didn't feel disappointment. She just noticed, and then she placed the phone back down. That was new. Not reacting, not waiting, not hoping, just being. Later that afternoon, she found herself standing in front of her closet, looking at clothes she hadn't worn in weeks. Work had been her routine. Home had been her focus. Everything else had quietly faded into the background. But now, there was space again. Not the kind you fill quickly, the kind you grow into. She reached for a simple dress, holding it up for a moment before changing. The process was slow, careful, her movements still measured by the changes in her body. But there was intention behind it, not for anyone else, for herself. When she looked in the mirror this time, it wasn't just a check. It was to see, really see, not the version of her that had been adjusting, or waiting, or holding space for something that wasn't being returned. Just her, standing, present, whole. Okay, she said quietly. And this time, the word carried something different. Not reassurance, not convincing, just truth. She stepped out later than she planned. The air outside felt light against her skin, carrying that familiar Cleveland rhythm she had always known. Nothing had changed out here. Cars still passed. People still moved with purpose. Life continued. And for the first time in a while, she wasn't trying to catch up to it. She walked slowly, not rushing toward anything, just letting herself move. A small store caught her attention. Nothing special, but something about it made her step inside. The space was calm, shelves neatly arranged, soft music playing in the background. She moved through it quietly, fingers brushing lightly against items she didn't need. Not shopping, just present. A mirror near the back wall caught her reflection again. This time, she didn't pause long, didn't study, didn't question. She simply looked and kept walking. That shift? Small, but real. By the time she returned home, the sun had lowered slightly, casting soft light across her living room. Pamela placed her bag down and sat again, exhaling gently. Her body reminded her to slow down, so she did. No resistance, no frustration, just listening. Her mother's voice found its way back to her, the same way it always did when life shifted. Clear, unapologetic. Don't depend on nobody who can wake up one day and change their mind. Pamela closed her eyes briefly, not because it hurt, but because it made sense in a way it hadn't fully before. She had understood the words growing up, but now she understood the weight behind them, and more importantly, the freedom in them, because choosing herself didn't feel like loss. It felt like alignment, like stepping back into something she never should have stepped away from. Her peace, her clarity, her direction, and maybe that was the part she hadn't seen clearly before. It wasn't about Christopher leaving, or staying, or choosing anything differently. It was about her choosing herself. Regardless, the evening settled slowly around her. No noise, no distraction, just a steady quiet. Pamela rested her head back against the couch, one hand still placed gently over her belly. Her breathing slowed, even, grounded, and then a thought surfaced, soft, unannounced. She opened her eyes slightly, her expression shifting just a little, not fear, not confusion, just realization. Her hand stilled, then pressed just slightly more firmly against her stomach. She didn't speak right away, didn't rush the moment, because something about it didn't need urgency. It needed acknowledgement. Quiet, careful, certain. Pamela exhaled slowly, and though nothing dramatic happened, nothing loud, something had changed. Not outside, not around her, within her. A shift, subtle, but undeniable. And this time, she didn't question it. She simply sat with it, understanding that whatever came next, she would meet it the same way she met everything else. Steady, present, and finally, on her own terms. The hospital felt colder than usual that morning. Not physically, but in a way Pamela couldn't immediately explain. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder as she walked through the entrance, her steps steady but slower than before. Her body had its own rhythm now, one she had learned not to rush. Everything around her moved like it always did. Nurses passing by, phones ringing in the distance, soft conversations layered over the steady hum of activity. Nothing had changed, and yet something didn't sit right. Pamela checked in at the front desk, offering a polite nod as her name was confirmed. "Have a seat. They'll call you shortly," the receptionist said. Pamela turned toward the waiting area. Same chairs, same arrangement, same quiet atmosphere filled with people pretending not to notice each other. She lowered herself into a seat carefully, exhaling once she settled. Her hand rested instinctively on her belly. "We good," she murmured under her breath. A small movement answered her. That steadied her more than anything else around her, but the feeling remained subtle, persistent, like something just beneath the surface. Pamela glanced around the room. Couples sat close together. A man leaned toward his partner, whispering something that made her smile. Another woman rested her head lightly on a shoulder beside her. Pamela looked away, not because it bothered her, but because she didn't need to study it. She already understood what it meant. Her phone sat quietly in her hand. No messages, no distractions, just time and space. Too much of both. She shifted slightly in her seat, adjusting her back. Waiting had never been something she enjoyed, not because she was impatient, but because waiting gave thoughts room to move. And today, they were moving. Her last visit hadn't felt like this. It had been routine, predictable. Now, there was something different. She couldn't name it, but she felt it. A nurse stepped into the waiting area, scanning a clipboard briefly. "Pamela?" Pamela looked up immediately. "That's me." The nurse offered a small smile. "Come with me." Pamela stood slowly, following behind her down the hallway. The sound of their footsteps echoed lightly against the floor. Left turn, then another, familiar paths. But today, each step felt heavier, not physically, just aware. They stopped outside a room. "Go ahead," the nurse said, gesturing toward the door. Pamela stepped inside. The room was simple, clean, prepared. She placed her bag down and eased herself onto the examination bed, adjusting carefully. A few seconds passed, then a minute, then more. Pamela glanced toward the door, still closed. That feeling again. Stronger now, not fear, not anxiety, just something unsettled. She shifted slightly, her fingers brushing against the edge of the bed. Her breathing stayed steady, controlled, but her awareness sharpened. Footsteps passed outside. Voices moved along the hallway. Then, the door opened, but it wasn't a doctor. It was the same nurse. She stepped in, checking something quickly. "Small update," she said. Pamela straightened slightly. "What kind of update?" The nurse looked at her briefly. "Your doctor had to step into an emergency case. You've been reassigned." Pamela blinked once. "Reassigned?" "It's just for today," the nurse added quickly. "Nothing to worry about." Pamela nodded slowly. "Okay," but something about that didn't settle easily. She had been coming here consistently. Same doctor, same routine. Consistency had become something she relied on. And now, shift. Unexpected. Unplanned. She adjusted slightly on the bed again. "Who's taking over?" she asked. The nurse glanced down at her notes. "He'll be in shortly." Pamela didn't react outwardly, but internally. Something tightened, not enough to alarm her, just enough to register. "All right," she said. The nurse gave a reassuring nod and stepped back out, closing the door gently behind her. Silence followed, not the comfortable kind, the kind that stretches. Pamela sat there, her hands resting on her belly again. Her thumb moved slowly against the fabric of her dress, back and forth, a grounding motion. Her eyes moved toward the door, then away, then back again. She didn't know why, but she couldn't shake it. That feeling had followed her from the parking lot, into the waiting room, down the hallway, and now, here, inside this room, waiting, and whatever was about to walk through that door, felt like more than just a routine change. Pamela exhaled slowly, steady, measured, but this time, she didn't try to explain the feeling away. She let it sit, because something told her this wasn't random, and whatever came next was already in motion. The handle turned slowly, not rushed, not hesitant, just deliberate. Pamela's eyes lifted toward the door before it fully opened, her body going still in a way she didn't plan. For a brief second, everything around her seemed to pause, not the world, just her awareness of it. The door opened wider, and then Him. Christopher stepped inside. White coat. Calm posture. Professional. Like nothing about this moment carried weight. Like this was just another room. Another patient. Another day. But the second his eyes met hers, that shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way anyone else would notice. But it was there. Recognition. Immediate. Unavoidable. Neither of them spoke right away. The air in the room changed. Quiet. Heavy. Full. Pamela didn't move. Didn't blink. Her mind didn't rush. It slowed. Like it needed time to process what was standing in front of her. Christopher closed the door behind him gently. The sound clicked into place. Final. For a moment, he remained where he was. Not stepping forward. Not stepping back. Just there. Then. Pamela. Her name. Simple. But it landed deeper than expected. She swallowed once, her voice taking a second before it followed. Christopher. No question in it. No confusion. Just acknowledgement. Because there was no denying what she was seeing. He walked a few steps closer, stopping at a professional distance. Not too far. Not too close. Enough to maintain space, but not enough to remove the tension. I didn't know it was you, he said. His tone was steady, measured, but not empty. Pamela held his gaze. You're my reassignment? Christopher nodded once. Yes. Another pause. Neither of them rushing to fill it. Pamela adjusted slightly on the bed, her hand instinctively moving to her belly again. A subtle motion, but it didn't go unnoticed. Christopher's eyes followed it briefly, then returned to her face. Professional, controlled. How far along are you? He asked. The shift in tone was clear, intentional. Pamela noticed it. Of course she did. Second trimester, she replied. Her voice matched his now, even, composed. Christopher gave a small nod, reaching for her file. His movements were precise, familiar, like he had done this countless times, because he had. But this wasn't just another case, and both of them knew it. You've been coming regularly, he said, scanning the notes. Yes. Any complications so far? No. His eyes moved across the page again, then back to her. You're carrying twins. It wasn't a question. Pamela nodded. A boy and a girl. Christopher paused for half a second. Not long, but enough. Then, that's good. The word felt insufficient, but neither of them addressed it. He set the file down carefully, his focus returning fully to her. I'll be handling your checkup today, he said. Pamela watched him, not questioning, not challenging, just observing. You work here now? She asked. Christopher met her eyes again. Yes. How long? A while. She nodded once. No follow-up. No need, because the real question wasn't how long, it was why she didn't know, and neither of them said that out loud. Christopher adjusted his gloves slowly, his attention shifting briefly to the equipment. Everything about his movement stayed controlled, but there was something underneath it, something restrained. Pamela saw it because she knew him, or at least, she used to. You didn't expect this, he said after a moment. It wasn't framed as a question. Pamela shook her head slightly. No, neither did you. She didn't say it, but it hung there anyway. Christopher nodded once. Me neither. That was the closest either of them came to acknowledging what this actually was. Not coincidence. Not simple. Something more complicated. Something neither of them had prepared for. Silence settled again, but this time, it didn't stretch awkwardly. It sat between them. Present. Acknowledged. Pamela's fingers moved lightly against her belly again. A grounding habit. Christopher noticed. Again. But this time, he didn't look away immediately. Instead, his voice softened, just slightly. You okay? It wasn't strictly medical, and they both knew that. Pamela held his gaze. Yes. A simple answer, but not careless. Christopher nodded, accepting it, not pushing, not digging deeper, because whatever existed between them before, this wasn't the place to unravel it. Not now, not like this. He stepped slightly closer, preparing to continue the checkup. Professional, focused, but the space between them remained charged. Not loud, not overwhelming, just present. Every word carried weight. Every pause meant something. and neither of them tried to pretend otherwise. Pamela shifted slightly, adjusting her position as instructed. Christopher moved with precision, his attention on the process. But even in that, there was awareness of her, of the moment, of everything unspoken. Then, as the silence settled again, Pamela spoke, quiet, direct. "You really didn't know it was me?" Christopher's hands paused briefly, just for a second, then continued. "No." He didn't look up when he said it. Pamela watched him closely, measuring, not doubting, just reading, because she had learned how to read him a long time ago. And some things don't disappear. They stay, even after time, even after distance. Christopher finished adjusting the equipment, then finally met her eyes again. And this time, there was no space left to pretend this was just routine, because it wasn't, and both of them knew it. If this ever happened to you, what would you do? Comment below. I really want to hear your thoughts. Christopher adjusted the monitor slightly, his focus fixed on the task in front of him. Professional, precise, controlled. But the silence between them had changed. It wasn't just tension anymore. It was awareness, the kind that doesn't fade just because you choose not to address it. Pamela lay still, her eyes not on the ceiling, not on the equipment, on him, watching, not emotionally, not reactively, just clearly. "You've done this before," she said quietly. Christopher glanced at her briefly. "Yes, that's not what I meant." His hand paused slightly against the edge of the machine. Not enough to disrupt anything, just enough to register. Pamela didn't move, didn't look away. "You've been here," she continued. "In this hospital?" Christopher straightened slightly. "Yes." Another pause. Then, "You knew I came here?" The question landed directly, no softness around it, no attempt to make it easier. Christopher didn't answer immediately. And that told her more than the answer itself. Pamela's fingers pressed lightly against the sheet beneath her, not tense, just grounded. "You did," she said, not accusing, just certain. Christopher exhaled slowly, not defensive, not dismissive, just accepting that there was no reason to avoid it now. "Yes." The word settled into the room, heavy, still. Pamela nodded once, not surprised, but not untouched either. "How?" she asked. Christopher met her eyes. "I saw your file." "When?" "A while ago." That answer didn't rush. It didn't hide, but it also didn't explain enough. Pamela held his gaze. "And you didn't think to say anything?" Christopher's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, in restraint. It wasn't appropriate. Pamela's expression didn't change. "Appropriate," she repeated. The word sat between them, measured, tested. "You mean professional," she added. "Yes." Another pause. Then, "But you still took the case." Christopher didn't look away this time. No, there it was, clear, uncovered. Pamela's eyes didn't waver. "You requested it." Not a question. Christopher's silence lasted a fraction longer this time. Then, "Yes." The room didn't react. No sound, no shift, just truth landing exactly where it needed to. Pamela inhaled slowly, then exhaled just as steady. "Why?" One word. "Direct." Christopher looked at her fully now. No file, no equipment, just her. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." The answer came without hesitation, without adjustment, and because of that, it felt real. Pamela studied him for a moment, not emotionally overwhelmed, not shaken, just processing. "That's not your responsibility," she said. Christopher nodded slightly. "I know, but you did it anyway." "Yes." The space between them held steady, neither of them raising their voice, neither of them stepping outside the boundaries of the moment. But the line between professional and personal, it had already shifted. "You didn't think that would be complicated?" Pamela asked. Christopher's expression remained composed. It already was. That answer stayed in the air longer than expected. Pamela looked at him carefully, because that wasn't just about the present. It was about everything before this, everything they didn't resolve, everything they left unfinished. "And you thought this would make it less complicated?" she asked. Christopher shook his head once. No. Honest, simple, unprotected. Pamela's gaze softened slightly. Not in emotion, in understanding. You always do that, she said quietly. Christopher's brow moved just slightly. Do what? Make decisions that make sense to you, without thinking about what they do to me. The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be, because they were precise. Christopher didn't interrupt, didn't defend. He let them land, because this time, there was no argument to offer. I'm not here to disrupt anything, he said after a moment. Pamela tilted her head slightly. But you already have. Another pause. Christopher looked down briefly, then back at her. That wasn't my intention. I know, she replied, and she meant that. That was the difference now. She wasn't questioning his intent. She was recognizing the outcome. And that's the problem, she added. Christopher absorbed that quietly, because intention had never been the issue between them. It was always what followed. Pamela shifted slightly, adjusting her position again. Her hand moved back to her belly. Grounding, steady. I've been fine, she said. Christopher nodded. I can see that. And I didn't need you to step in. I wasn't trying to step in, he replied. Pamela held his gaze. You requested my case. Silence. That line didn't leave space to move around it. Christopher exhaled slowly. Then, I wanted to be present. The word lingered. Present. Pamela heard it, fully, and something in her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough, because that word, it carried history, weight, meaning. You weren't before, she said. Christopher didn't respond immediately, because there was no way to reshape that truth. No, he said finally. Quiet, direct. Pamela nodded once. That was all. No reaction layered over it. No emotional rise. Just acknowledgement. And somehow, that made it heavier than anything else. Christopher stepped back slightly, creating a bit more space. Not distance, just awareness of where they stood now. We'll finish the checkup, he said. His tone shifted back. Professional, structured, but not disconnected. Pamela didn't argue, didn't resist. Okay, simple, but not passive. Because even within that, there was clarity. The lines were there, even if they had been crossed, even if they weren't as firm as before. And as the room settled again, one thing became clear between them. This wasn't just a reassignment. It wasn't just timing. It wasn't just coincidence. It was something neither of them had fully resolved, finding its way back, in a place where neither of them could ignore it. The checkup ended, without interruption. On paper, everything looked stable. Vitals recorded, measurements taken, notes updated, but something about it didn't settle the way it should have. Pamela sat on the edge of the bed, adjusting her dress slowly after Christopher stepped back. His movements were routine again. Gloves off, hands washed, file updated, everything in place, except the feeling in the room. You're good for now, he said, his tone steady. For now. Pamela caught that, not questioning it immediately, but not ignoring it either. She slid her feet carefully onto the floor, pausing for a second before standing. Her body didn't move as easily as it had earlier that morning. There was a slight heaviness now, subtle but present. She straightened slowly. Christopher noticed. His eyes shifted toward her posture. You okay? Pamela nodded once. I'm fine. But this time, it didn't land the same way, because even she felt it. That difference. Small, but there. A pressure low in her abdomen. Not sharp, not painful, just unfamiliar. She adjusted her stance slightly, her hand moving instinctively to her belly. Christopher stepped a little closer, not intrusive, just aware. What are you feeling? He asked. Pamela hesitated for a moment, not because she didn't want to answer, but because she was trying to understand it herself. Just heavy, she said. Where? She placed her hand slightly lower. Here. Christopher's expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough to sharpen his focus. How long? It started just now, she replied. That wasn't entirely true. It had been building quietly since she got there, but this was the first moment it felt noticeable enough to name. Christopher nodded slowly. Sit back down. Pamela didn't argue. She eased herself back onto the bed carefully. The movement took more effort this time, and that didn't go unnoticed either. Christopher moved quickly, but calmly, reaching for the monitor again. "We're going to check a few things again," he said. His tone had changed. Still controlled, but more alert. Pamela watched him, not anxious, but attentive. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means I want to be sure everything is progressing the way it should." He didn't over-explain, didn't rush to reassure, just stayed clear. That alone told her enough. The room shifted, not in sound, not in movement, in weight, the kind that settles quietly but doesn't leave. Christopher adjusted the monitor, placing it carefully. "Let me know if anything changes," he said. Pamela nodded. "I will." Silence followed, but not empty. Focused, intentional. The soft sound of the machine filled the space. Steady, rhythmic. Christopher watched the readings closely. Pamela watched him, because she knew that look. The one where his mind was already working ahead, calculating, anticipating, not panicking, but not relaxed either. "How often have you felt this?" he asked. Pamela shook her head slightly. "I haven't." "Not like this." Christopher didn't respond immediately. He adjusted something on the screen, then checked again. His jaw tightened slightly, not visibly to anyone else, but to her. It was clear. "Christopher," he looked at her. "Yes, talk to me." A simple request, but direct. He held her gaze for a second, then answered, "It could be nothing." Pamela didn't react to that, because she had learned something over time. When someone starts with, "It could be nothing," there's always something. "And if it's not?" she asked. Christopher exhaled slowly. Then, "We'll monitor you." Not a full answer, but not avoidance either. Pamela nodded once, accepting it, but not fully settling into it, because her body was speaking in ways it hadn't before. A slight tightening, then release, then again, not rhythmic, not consistent, but present. She shifted slightly, her fingers pressing lightly against the bed. Christopher noticed immediately. "Did you feel that?" "Yes." "How strong?" "Not strong, just there." He nodded, watching, waiting. The room felt smaller now, not physically, just in focus, everything narrowing down to what was happening in that moment. Pamela's breathing stayed steady, but her awareness had sharpened, because something had changed, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. "I'm going to keep you here for a bit," Christopher said. Pamela looked at him. "For how long?" "Until I'm comfortable with what I'm seeing." She held his gaze, then nodded. "Okay." No resistance, no hesitation, because this wasn't about control anymore. It was about trust, not in him, not entirely, but in the situation and what it required. Christopher stepped back slightly, still watching the monitor, still focused, still present. But this time, his presence carried more than just professionalism. It carried responsibility, and Pamela felt that, not as comfort, not as reassurance, but as reality, because whatever this was, it wasn't passing quickly. And for the first time since she walked into the hospital that day, the feeling she couldn't explain earlier finally made sense. Something wasn't right. The monitor continued its steady rhythm, not urgent, not alarming, but no longer easy to ignore. Pamela shifted slightly against the bed, her body adjusting to the unfamiliar pressure that came and went without warning. Each time it returned, it held her attention a little longer. Christopher remained nearby, reviewing the readings, then looking back at her, watching, not just clinically, carefully. The room had grown quieter than before, not because the hospital had slowed, but because everything inside this space had narrowed to just the two of them, and what neither of them had finished. Pamela broke the silence first. "You always wait until something forces you to stop." Christopher looked up. The statement didn't sound like an accusation. It sounded like recognition. He held her gaze for a moment before responding. "I didn't think I was avoiding anything." Pamela gave a small, almost unnoticeable shake of her head. "You weren't avoiding," she said. "You were postponing." Christopher's expression shifted slightly. "Those aren't the same thing." "They are," she replied. "When you keep telling yourself you'll deal with something later." The words didn't rise. They didn't press. They settled, Christopher exhaled slowly, leaning back just enough to rest his weight against the counter behind him. I thought I had time, he said. There it was, not framed, not explained, just said. Pamela looked at him, really looked, because that sentence, it held more than the moment. It held everything that came before this. And what made you think that? She asked. Christopher's gaze dropped briefly, then returned, because nothing felt urgent back then. Pamela let that sit for a second. Then, it was urgent to me. No emphasis, no sharpness, just truth. Christopher absorbed that without interruption. I didn't see it that way, he admitted. I know. Her voice didn't shift, didn't harden, because this wasn't new information. This was something she had already understood years ago. You were focused on what was ahead of you, she continued, and I was focused on what was right in front of us. Christopher nodded slowly. That's accurate. Another pause, not empty, just full of everything they didn't say when it mattered. Pamela adjusted her position slightly, her hand moving back to her belly as another wave of pressure came and went. Christopher noticed immediately. How is it now? He asked. Same, she replied. Still there. He nodded, his eyes briefly checking the monitor again before returning to her. Tell me if it changes. I will. Silence returned, but it didn't feel unfinished anymore. It felt open. Christopher shifted his stance slightly. There were things I should have said, he added. Pamela looked at him. But you didn't. No. Why? Christopher didn't answer immediately, because the answer wasn't simple. I didn't know how to say them without changing everything. Pamela held his gaze. It was already changing. That landed. Clear. Unavoidable. Christopher ran a hand lightly along the back of his neck. I thought if I just handled what I needed to handle first, everything else would fall into place after. Pamela gave a small nod. That sounds like you. There was no sarcasm in it, just familiarity. Christopher almost smiled, but didn't. Yeah, another pause. Then Pamela spoke again. I wasn't asking for everything, she said. Just presence. Christopher's eyes stayed on her. I see that now. Now doesn't change then. I know. The exchange didn't carry tension the way it might have before, because neither of them was trying to win anything. They were just stating what was. I used to wait, Pamela said quietly. Christopher's expression tightened slightly. I know. No, she replied. You knew I was there, but you didn't know I was waiting. That distinction sat heavier, because it was true. Christopher didn't interrupt, didn't correct. He let it stay. I stopped waiting before I left. She added, that was new. Christopher's eyes lifted fully to hers. You never said that. I didn't need to, Pamela replied. It was already happening. Another silence, but this one carried closure, not complete, but beginning. Christopher nodded once. I didn't realize how far things had gone. Pamela looked at him steadily. That's because you weren't looking. He accepted that. No argument. No explanation. Just acceptance. The monitor continued its steady sound in the background. But now, it wasn't the only thing holding the room together, because something else had shifted. Not dramatically, not visibly, but internally. Both of them had stepped into a conversation they had avoided for too long. And now, it wasn't about going back. It wasn't about fixing what had already passed. It was about understanding it, clearly, without distortion, without defense. Christopher straightened slightly, his tone returning to something more grounded. I'm here now, he said. Pamela held his gaze, not rejecting it, but not leaning into it either. I know, simple, neutral, but not dismissive, because being here now, it meant something, just not everything. Another slight wave of pressure passed through her, stronger this time. She inhaled slowly, her hand pressing more firmly against her belly. Christopher stepped closer immediately. That felt different. Pamela nodded. Yeah, how strong? Stronger than before. Christopher's focus sharpened again, his attention shifting fully back to the present, back to what mattered now. Because whatever conversation had started between them, it was no longer the only thing unfolding, and as the monitor continued its steady rhythm, one thing became clear. This moment wasn't just about what they didn't say before. It was about what was happening now, and what it might lead to next. Christopher didn't step away this time. He stayed close, his attention fixed on both Pamela and the monitor. The change had been slight, but not subtle. He had seen it, and more importantly, he had recognized it. "How far apart are they coming?" he asked. Pamela exhaled slowly, trying to track it. "I don't know. It's not consistent." "Are they building?" She paused, waiting. Another wave came, stronger. Her fingers tightened slightly against the sheet. "Yes." Christopher nodded once, already reaching to adjust the monitor. "Stay with me," he said, not as instruction, as focus. Pamela steadied her breathing. "I am," but this time, it took effort. The pressure was no longer something she could dismiss. It was present, growing, unpredictable. Christopher's movements became more precise. He checked the readings again. Then again, his expression didn't break. But it shifted enough. "What is it?" Pamela asked. Christopher didn't answer immediately, not because he was avoiding, because he was confirming, watching, calculating. Then, "I don't like the pattern I'm seeing." Pamela's gaze held steady on him. "What does that mean?" Christopher met her eyes. "It means your body might be preparing earlier than expected." The words landed, not loud, but heavy. Pamela didn't react outwardly, but her hand moved instinctively, pressing against her belly. "Earlier." "How early?" she asked. Christopher exhaled slowly. "Too early for where you are right now." Silence, not empty, not distant, immediate, real. Pamela swallowed once. Her voice stayed level, but quieter. "They're not due yet." "No," Christopher said. "They're not." Another wave came, sharper this time. Her breath caught slightly before she controlled it. Christopher stepped closer. "Talk to me." That one was stronger. "How long?" "A few seconds." He nodded, turning slightly to check the monitor again. The rhythm had changed, still not chaotic, but no longer easy. "We're going to need to monitor you more closely," he said. Pamela watched him. "How close?" Christopher didn't soften it. "I want you admitted." The word settled differently, final, structured. Pamela blinked once. "Admitted?" "Yes." "For observation?" "For stability." That distinction mattered. Pamela exhaled slowly, leaning back slightly against the bed. Her mind didn't race. It narrowed, focused. "What happens if it doesn't stabilize?" she asked. Christopher held her gaze. "Then we prepare." "For what?" Another pause, short, but deliberate, for the possibility of early delivery. The room didn't move, didn't react, but everything inside it shifted. Pamela's hand stayed on her belly, still, grounded, but her fingers pressed more firmly now. Not panic, but awareness. "They're not ready," she said. Christopher didn't respond immediately, because that was the truth. "They may not be," he said finally. Another wave came, not as sharp, but close enough. Pamela closed her eyes briefly, breathing through it. Christopher watched closely. Every detail, every reaction, because this was no longer just precaution. This was movement, real, unfolding. "How long have you felt anything like this before today?" he asked. Pamela opened her eyes again. "I haven't." Christopher nodded. That confirmed it. Sudden onset, unpredictable. He stepped back slightly, already reaching for what he needed next. "I'm going to call in additional monitoring," he said. Pamela didn't stop him, didn't question it, because, whatever this was, it had already moved beyond something she could manage alone. "Christopher," he paused, looking back at her. "Yes." Her voice stayed steady, but this time, it carried something deeper. "Are they going to be okay?" The question didn't rush. It didn't break. It held. Christopher met her eyes fully. No distance, no deflection. "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure they are." Not a promise, not a guarantee, but real. And that mattered more. Pamela nodded once, accepting that, not because it removed the fear, but because it grounded it. Another contraction came, stronger again. Her breath tightened slightly before she steadied it. Christopher moved immediately. I need you to stay as still as you can, he said. I will. His voice remained controlled, focused, but now there was urgency beneath it, not loud, not chaotic, but present, because this had shifted completely from monitoring to response, from possibility to preparation. Christopher stepped toward the door, already calling for support. Pamela remained where she was, still, aware, present, her hand pressed against her belly, her breathing measured, but her mind clear, because fear had finally taken shape, not imagined, not distant, real. And as the room began to fill with movement again, footsteps, voices, preparation, one truth settled firmly into place. This moment was no longer about the past. It was no longer about what they didn't say. It was about what was happening now, and what might happen next. Make sure you're still watching, because what happens next will stay with you. The room changed within minutes. What had been controlled became active. What had been monitored became urgent. Pamela was moved quickly, the bed rolling through the hallway as voices surrounded her. Not chaotic, but fast, precise, coordinated. She gripped the sides of the bed as another contraction hit, stronger than anything before. Her breath broke this time. Not fully, but enough. Stay with me. Christopher's voice came from beside her, not distant. Right there. I'm here. Pamela nodded once, her jaw tightening as she forced her breathing to steady again. I know. The doors opened. Delivery room. Bright lights. Prepared space. Everything ready before she even fully processed the transition. They moved her onto the bed, carefully. Voices layered over each other. Instructions, confirmations, adjustments. But one voice stayed clear. Christopher. Pamela, listen to me. Her eyes found him immediately. Focused. Grounded. I need you to follow my lead, he said. I will, she replied. No hesitation. No fear in her voice. Just readiness. Another contraction hit. Hard. Her body responded before her mind could. She gripped the sides again, her breath tightening. That's it, Christopher said. Work with it. She pushed. The pressure surged. Her body followed. Everything narrowed. No past. No future. Just this moment. Good, he said. Again. Pamela pushed again, her breath breaking fully this time. The effort showed now, not weakness. Intensity. She held on, focused, driven. Minutes blurred. Time lost structure. Everything became movement, effort, response. Then, there's the head, Christopher said, his voice steady but firm. Pamela didn't slow, didn't hesitate. Keep going. She pushed again, harder, and then sharp, immediate, alive. The room shifted, not quieter, but lighter. The first baby is out, Christopher said. A boy. Pamela's breath fell out of her chest in relief she didn't realize she had been holding. She didn't reach immediately, didn't move, because her body hadn't finished, and Christopher knew it. Stay with me, he said quickly. We're not done. Pamela nodded, pulling herself back into focus. Her chest rose and fell as she tried to recover between contractions. Then, another wave, stronger, different. Christopher's expression changed. Not panic, but alert, focused deeper now. Second baby's position is not ideal, he said. Pamela's eyes locked on him. What does that mean? It means we need to move quickly. No softening, no delay, just truth. Another contraction hit. She pushed, but this time, it didn't respond the same way. Christopher adjusted immediately. Again, he said. Pamela tried, pushed, but something felt off. The rhythm had changed. The pressure felt wrong. Christopher's voice sharpened, not louder, but more urgent. Pamela, I need you with me. I'm trying, she said, breath breaking. I know. Stay focused. His hands moved with precision, adjusting, guiding. Every second counted now. The room felt tighter, more controlled, more serious. Heart rate is dropping, someone said. Pamela heard it, not clearly, but enough. What? She started. Christopher cut in immediately. Look at me. Her eyes locked onto his again. Not the room, not the voices, just him. "We're going to get this done," he said. His voice didn't waver, didn't crack. It held, and that steadied her more than anything else. Another contraction came, stronger. She pushed again. Everything in her followed. No hesitation, no holding back. Christopher adjusted again. Focused, precise. Then, almost there, Pamela pushed again, her breath breaking fully now, her body fully committed. And then, another cry, but weaker, softer, delayed. Christopher moved immediately. No pause, no release. The second baby was out, but not stable. Pamela tried to lift her head slightly. "What's wrong?" Christopher didn't answer immediately, because he was already working. The baby wasn't crying the same way. Not strong, not immediate. The room shifted again, from delivery to response. "Stay with me," Christopher said. This time, not just to Pamela, to both. Pamela's chest tightened. "Christopher." He looked at her briefly, then back to what he was doing. "We've got her," he said. Not reassurance, commitment. Pamela lay back, her breathing uneven now, her body exhausted, but her mind fully aware, because the moment had split, one child breathing strong, the other fighting too, and everything now depended on what happened next. The room didn't slow immediately. Even after the second baby responded, even after the first cry strengthened, even after the tension eased just enough to breathe again, movement continued. Careful, focused, measured. Pamela lay still, her chest rising and falling unevenly, her body still catching up with everything it had just gone through. Her eyes searched instinctively, not for the room, not for the equipment, for them. "Are they okay?" she asked. Her voice was softer now, but clear. Christopher didn't answer immediately, not because he didn't hear her, but because he was confirming, watching, making sure. Then, "They're stable." The word mattered. Not perfect, not ideal, but stable. Pamela exhaled, not fully, but enough. Her body sank slightly into the bed, the tension easing just enough to let her feel the weight of everything. "Can I see them?" she asked. Christopher nodded. In a moment, not a delay, a process. Pamela accepted that because she understood now. Everything here moved with purpose, not emotion, not assumption, just what needed to be done. The first baby was brought closer, wrapped, small, alive. Pamela's eyes softened the second she saw him. Her hand lifted slowly, carefully, touching, just enough. A quiet connection, no words, none needed. Christopher stood nearby, watching but not intruding, because this moment, it belonged to her. The second baby was still being attended to, closer now, but not yet ready. Pamela noticed. Of course she did. "Her?" she asked. Christopher stepped slightly closer. "She's responding." Not fully reassuring, but not uncertain. Pamela nodded once, holding on to that, because right now, that was enough. Time moved differently after that. Not fast, not slow, just steady. The room gradually settled. Voices softened. Movement reduced. What had been urgent became controlled again. Christopher stepped away briefly, giving space where it was needed. But he didn't leave. He stayed within reach, within awareness, because something still remained between them, unspoken, unresolved, and now, unavoidable. Pamela rested back, her energy lowered, but her mind still active. Her hand remained close to her child, present, grounded. Christopher returned after a few minutes, standing near her side again, not too close, not distant, just there. "Pamela." She turned her head slightly toward him. Yes, there was a pause, not hesitation, preparation, because what came next needed to be said carefully. "You've handled everything well," he said. Pamela held his gaze. "That's not what you want to say." Christopher didn't deny it. "No." Another pause. Then, "There's something we need to talk about." Pamela didn't shift, didn't react. She simply waited, because she already knew, not the details, but the direction. "You requested my case," she said. Christopher nodded. "Yes. And now we're here." "Yes." Her eyes held steady on his. So say it. Direct, clear, no space for avoidance. Christopher exhaled slowly. Then, when I saw your file, I didn't just recognize your name. Pamela's expression didn't change, but her focus sharpened. I saw the timeline. Silence, not empty, focused. And, she asked. Christopher met her eyes fully, and I knew there was a possibility. There it was, not stretched, not softened, placed exactly where it needed to be. Pamela didn't react immediately, because she understood what he meant, not assumed, not guessed, understood. You're saying, she began. Christopher didn't interrupt, but he finished it. They could be mine. The room didn't respond, but the air shifted. Pamela's hand remained still, resting, grounded. Her breathing didn't break, didn't rise. It stayed controlled, because this wasn't something she hadn't considered. It was something she hadn't needed to confirm. Until now. You didn't ask before, she said. Christopher nodded. I didn't have the right to. And now you do. No, honest, immediate. But the situation changed. Pamela studied him, not emotionally overwhelmed, not reactive, just measuring. You think this changes something? She asked. Christopher didn't rush the answer. No. Another pause. Then. But it matters. That word stayed. Clear. Present. Pamela looked at him for a long moment. Then. It matters how. Christopher didn't step closer. Didn't reach. He stayed exactly where he was. It matters because I should have been here, he said. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Pamela's eyes didn't move from his. You weren't. I know. Silence followed. Not sharp, not heavy, just true. I didn't come back because of this, he added. Pamela tilted her head slightly. No? No. I was already here. Another layer, another truth. And you still chose to step in, she said. Yes. Knowing this. Yes. Pamela exhaled slowly. Her body still, her mind clear. That's a decision you made, she said. Christopher nodded. Yes. And now you have to live with it. No emotion layered over it. Just reality. Christopher didn't argue, didn't explain. He accepted it, because he understood. This wasn't about claiming anything. It was about acknowledging what already existed. And as the room settled further into quiet, one thing became clear. This wasn't the beginning of something new. It was the return of something unresolved, now standing fully in front of both of them, with no space left to ignore it. Recovery didn't happen all at once. It unfolded in small, steady moments. The room Pamela woke up in was quieter than before. No urgency, no overlapping voices, just soft movement in the background and the steady rhythm of machines that no longer signaled danger, but care. Her body felt heavy, not in pain, just used, like it had given everything it had to give and was now asking for time in return. Pamela blinked slowly, her eyes adjusting to the light. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't rush to gather her thoughts. She let herself settle into the stillness. Then, she remembered. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, flat now, empty in a way that wasn't loss, but change. Her breath paused briefly. Then, your babies are okay. Christopher's voice, calm, present, right there. Pamela turned her head slightly. He was seated nearby, not standing over her, not moving around the room, just sitting, watching, waiting. How long? She started, her voice still soft. A few hours, he replied. Pamela nodded slowly. They're stable, he added. They're being monitored, but they're doing well. Pamela closed her eyes briefly. This time, the feeling moved deeper. Not just relief, understanding, because everything she had carried alone had led to this moment. Can I see them? She asked. Christopher stood with quiet intention. Yes. Moments later, they were brought in, small, wrapped, carefully held. Pamela's entire focus shifted. Nothing else existed in that moment. Not the room, not the past, just them, her children. She reached out slowly, her hands careful. The boy, stronger, steady. The girl, softer, still watched closely. But here, both here, Pamela's fingers rested gently against them, and something settled inside her, not just relief, clarity, a kind she hadn't fully reached before, because for the first time, she understood something without questioning it. She had made the right choices, even when they were hard, even when they felt lonely, even when they didn't make sense to anyone else. Her mother's voice echoed again, clear, unshaken. Don't depend on nobody who can wake up one day and change their mind. Pamela used to hear that as protection. Now, she understood it as direction, not to close herself off, but to never lose herself waiting for someone else to decide her value. Her grip didn't tighten, her expression didn't shift dramatically, but internally, something aligned. Christopher stood a short distance away, watching, not stepping in, not interrupting, and that mattered, because before, he would have filled the space with words. Now, he respected it. Time passed in quiet. Pamela leaned back slightly, her strength returning in small pieces. Her eyes lifted to him again. "You stayed," she said. Christopher nodded. Yes, no explanation, no performance, just truth. Pamela studied him carefully, because this wasn't about what he was saying. It was about what he was doing. "You don't have to," she said. Christopher held her gaze. "I know." A pause. Then, "I want to." The words didn't carry pressure. They didn't reach for anything. They simply stood. Pamela didn't respond immediately, because she had learned something important, wanting to be there, and choosing to stay consistently. "We're not always the same. You weren't here before," she said. Christopher nodded. "I wasn't, and now you are." Yes, no defense, no explanation, just acknowledgement. Pamela looked at him steadily. "Being here now doesn't erase anything. I know. And it doesn't guarantee anything. I know." Christopher didn't move closer, didn't try to reduce the space between them, because he understood this wasn't something he could step into. It was something he had to earn, over time, through consistency, not intention, not words. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. Pamela tilted her head slightly. "Then what are you doing?" Christopher answered simply, "Showing up." This time, it felt different, because it wasn't a statement. It was something already in motion. Pamela looked at him for a moment longer, then her attention shifted back to her children, her hand resting gently near them, grounded, present. She didn't make a decision. She didn't reopen the past. She didn't close the door either, because she understood something now she hadn't fully understood before. Love wasn't proven in moments. It was proven in patterns, and she was no longer willing to invest in anything that didn't show up consistently. Not again. The room remained quiet, but not empty. Christopher stayed where he was, not stepping forward, not stepping away, just present. And Pamela, she allowed that presence, but on her terms, measured, aware, whole, because choosing herself didn't mean shutting people out. It meant knowing who was allowed to stay, and why, and this time, she wasn't guessing, she was watching. If this story moved you even a little, like, share, and subscribe. You never know who needs to hear this.